It started with the mail, not with an argument, not with a crisis, not with anything dramatic enough to remember as the beginning, just the mail. A small stack of envelopes placed neatly on the kitchen table, lined up by size, with the corners squared like someone had prepared them for inspection. I noticed that first, not the missing letter. Not the opened flap, the neatness, because my mail was never neat. It usually sat near the fruit bowl in an uneven pile, half covered by a grocery receipt or a magazine I meant to read. Sometimes I opened things immediately. Sometimes I left them for days. That was how I had always done it. Messy, maybe, but mine. That morning, everything had been arranged. 3 white envelopes. One small catalog, one utility notice, nothing alarming, nothing that should have made me pause, and yet I did. My daughter was standing at the sink, rinsing a cup she hadn't used with her coat still on. She had stopped by just for a minute, she said, on her way to work. I remember that because she had started stopping by more often lately. Not every day, not enough to make it obvious, just enough that the rhythm of my mornings had begun to include her presence. A key in the door, a quick hello, a bag placed on the counter, a casual question about whether I had eaten. At first I found it sweet, then practical, then expected. And when something becomes expected, you stop asking why it started. You had quite a bit of mail, she said, not looking at me. I looked at the table. That's not quite a bit. She smiled softly. You know what I mean. I didn't, but I didn't say that. I sat down and reached for the first envelope. Before my fingers touched it, she turned from the sink and said, I already checked the important ones. I stopped, just for half a second. Checked, she dried her hands on a towel. Just to make sure there wasn't anything urgent. Her tone was light, helpful, the kind of tone people use when they want to make a boundary sound like a favor. I picked up the envelope anyway. It was from the electricity company, still sealed. The next one, too. The third had been opened, cleanly, carefully, not torn, not ripped, opened with something sharp, a letter opener maybe. Or a knife. I looked at the flap, then at her. You opened this. She gave a small shrug. It looked official. It was addressed to me. I know, no apology, no hesitation, just acknowledgement. That unsettled me more than if she had acted guilty. Because guilt means someone knows they crossed a line. She didn't seem to think there had been one. I unfolded the letter. It was from the housing office. A routine notice as far as I could tell, something about updating contact information, nothing urgent, nothing dangerous, nothing that required her eyes before mine. I placed it back on the table. You don't need to open my mail, I said. I wasn't trying to invade your privacy, she replied quickly, too quickly. I just worry you might miss something important. There it was, the reason, the soft one, the acceptable one, the one that makes objection feel ungrateful. I don't miss my mail, I said. She looked at the pile, then back at me, not accusing, not exactly, but with a sadness that felt prepared. Mom, she said softly, there were letters from last month still unopened in the drawer. I blinked, because that was true. There were, not because I had forgotten them. Because they were advertisements, statements I could check online, forms that didn't matter, but the way she said it made it sound different, like evidence, like a pattern. Like the beginning of a file. I leave things sometimes, I said. Everyone does, she nodded. Of course. But the nod didn't agree with me. It simply moved the conversation forward. She walked to the table and sat across from me. That was another thing she had started doing. Sitting, not just visiting, not just dropping by. Settling into the room as if conversations needed to happen there. I'm not trying to take over, she said. I hadn't used those words, but she had. And once she did, they entered the room. I didn't say you were. I know. She reached for the open letter, then stopped herself. A tiny movement, small enough to miss, but I saw it. She wanted to handle it again, to explain it. To own it, instead, she folded her hands. I just think it would be easier if I helped you keep track of things. I looked at her hands, at the careful stillness, then at the mail. Help me how? She relaxed slightly, as if that was the question she had been waiting for. I can sort the important things from the junk, bills, appointments, anything official. You don't have to deal with everything all at once. I already deal with it. You do, she said gently, then a pause, but sometimes late. Late, that word had weight. Because late suggests consequences, irresponsibility, decline. I sat back slowly. What was late? She didn't answer immediately. She looked down at the table as though remembering. The insurance form, I frowned. That wasn't late. It was close, but not late. She gave another small nod. Okay. Again, not agreement. A note being made, a correction stored for later. I felt the first real edge of irritation then. Not anger. Not yet. Just the quiet frustration of being spoken to as if every sentence required evaluation. I can open my own mail, I said. She looked at me with that same softness. I know you can. The words should have ended the conversation. But they didn't, because everything after I know you can was still waiting. I just don't want you to feel overwhelmed, she added. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because the word was wrong. Overwhelmed. I had raised children, managed a household. Buried a husband. Handled bills, doctors, repairs, taxes, grief, illness, loneliness, and every quiet responsibility that doesn't announce itself but still arrives every month. And now 3 envelopes on a table meant I might be overwhelmed. I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time I wondered if she was seeing me at all. Or if she had begun seeing an idea of me, a softer version, a weaker version, a version that needed sorting. I'm not overwhelmed, I said. She held my gaze. I didn't say you were, but she had. Not directly. Directly would have been rude. This was worse. It was careful. She stood after a moment and picked up her bag. I have to go, she said. Then she added almost casually, leave the letters on the table. I'll take a look tomorrow. No, I said. She paused near the door. The word had come out calmly, but it stopped her completely. I'll handle them, I said. For a second, her expression didn't move. Then she smiled. Of course. She left a minute later, after kissing my cheek and telling me to call if I needed anything. The apartment became quiet again, but not peaceful. I stayed at the table long after she was gone, looking at the envelopes. The opened one, the sealed ones, the careful arrangement. It would have been easy to dismiss. A daughter helping, a small overstep, nothing more. That is how these things begin, I think, not as theft, not as control, as help, as concern. As one opened letter on a Tuesday morning, I gathered the mail and carried it to my bedroom, not the kitchen drawer, not the table, somewhere less obvious. I placed it in the top drawer of my dresser beneath a folded scarf. Then I stopped, because there was already something there, an envelope, half hidden, folded once. I didn't recognize it. It had my name on it. No stamp, no postmark, just my name written in blue ink, my daughter's handwriting. I opened it slowly. Inside was a copy of a form, not filled out completely, but enough. At the top, in bold letters, authorized mail handling request. I read the title once. Then again, my eyes moved down the page. Name of resident, my name, my address, authorized contact. My daughter's name, reason for request. I stopped there. The line had already been filled in. Resident has difficulty managing official correspondence independently. For a long moment, I didn't move. The apartment was silent around me. The kind of silence that makes every word on paper feel louder. I read it again. Resident has difficulty managing official correspondence independently. Not may need help, not requested assistance, not temporary support, has difficulty, stated as fact, written before I had ever agreed, before I had even known. I sat on the edge of the bed, the form in my hands, and suddenly the opened letter on the kitchen table felt very different. It wasn't an overstep. It was a step, one that had already been planned. And as I looked at my daughter's handwriting beneath my name, I understood something I didn't want to understand. She hadn't started helping with my mail because she was worried. She had started helping so she could prove I needed her to. I didn't put the form back where I found it, not right away. I kept it in my hands, reading the same line again and again, as if the wording might change if I looked at it differently. Resident has difficulty managing official correspondence independently. The sentence didn't sound like my daughter, not in the way she usually spoke. It sounded official, structured. Like something she had copied from somewhere else, or something someone had suggested. That thought stayed with me longer than I expected. Because if she hadn't written it alone, then this wasn't just something she had decided. I folded the paper carefully, along the exact crease she had already made. Not because I wanted to preserve it, because I didn't want to leave any sign that I had seen it. That mattered, more than I would have admitted an hour earlier. I slid it back under the scarf exactly where it had been, then closed the drawer slowly. The room felt different now, not unfamiliar, but altered. Like a space where something had already happened, and I had only just noticed the result. I stood there for a moment, looking at the dresser as if it might explain something else. It didn't. So I went back to the kitchen. The table was still the same. 3 envelopes, one opened, the same arrangement, but now I couldn't look at them the same way. I sat down again, this time pulling the chair in closer, not out of comfort, out of focus. I picked up the opened letter again, read it from beginning to end. Nothing new, nothing urgent. Nothing that justified being opened before I saw it. That was the point. It wasn't about what the letter contained. It was about the act of opening it. Proof. A small, quiet piece of evidence. Something that could be pointed to later. She didn't even open it herself. I set it down, then took one of the sealed envelopes, turned it over, looked at the flap, untouched. I held it there for a second, then placed it back exactly where it had been. I wasn't going to open it, not now, because now even that felt like it might matter. I leaned back slightly and looked around the room. The same kitchen, the same light coming in through the window, the same chair across from me where she had been sitting just minutes ago. And yet the space felt observed, not by someone physically present, but by something that had already started, a process, a direction, something that didn't need to rush. Because it believed it was right, I stayed there for a while, long enough that the silence began to settle again, long enough that the initial shock softened into something clearer. Something more useful, understanding, not complete, but enough. She wasn't trying to take something all at once. She was building toward it, step by step, mail, then forms, then authorization. Each part small enough to seem reasonable, each part connected to the last. I stood up slowly and walked to the sink, not because I needed anything, because I needed movement. The room had started to feel too still. I ran the tap for a moment, then turned it off. The sound broke the quiet just enough. Then it returned. And in that quiet, something else came back to me. The way she had said it. I'll take a look tomorrow. Not if you need help. Not do you want me to check. I'll take a look, as if it had already been decided. As if the routine had already begun. I dried my hands, even though they weren't wet, and walked back to the table. The envelopes were still there, exactly as before. I reached out. Not for the opened one, for the smallest envelope, the one I hadn't looked at yet. My fingers touched it, then stopped, because something else caught my attention, the edge of the envelope. There was a faint line, almost invisible, like it had been pressed open and then resealed. Carefully, deliberately, I picked it up, held it closer to the light. The seal wasn't broken. But it wasn't original either. It had been opened, then closed again, more carefully than the first one, more discreetly. I felt something settle in my chest, not sharp, not sudden, just clear. She hadn't opened one letter. She had opened more, some openly, some not. I placed the envelope back down slowly, because now the pattern wasn't starting. It was already in motion. I walked back to the bedroom, opened the drawer again, looked at the form, then passed it, because something else had started to bother me. If she had prepared this, if she had written this already, then when had she planned to use it? I checked the bottom of the page. There was a date, filled in, not today, not yesterday. 3 days ago, 3 days before the lock, 3 days before the open letters, 3 days before this conversation. I stared at it for a long moment. Because that meant the decision had been made before anything I had noticed, before anything I could question, before anything I could stop. I closed the drawer again, this time more firmly. Then stood there, thinking, because now I had 2 choices, confront her or observe, and confronting her would lead to explanations, justifications, more careful words, more controlled conversations, but observing might show me something she didn't plan to reveal. I walked back into the kitchen, sat down again, and moved the envelopes, not much, just enough. A few centimeters, a slight change in order, a difference that only someone paying attention would notice. Then I stood up, looked at the table one last time, and left them there. Exactly where she expected them to be, almost, because now I wasn't trying to stop what she was doing. I was trying to see how far she had already gone. And what she would do next, when she realized something had changed. The next morning, I didn't touch the mail. That was the first decision I made when I woke up. Not because I didn't want to read it, because I wanted to see what would happen if I didn't. I left everything exactly where it was. Almost. The small shift I had made the day before was still there. Subtle, barely noticeable, but deliberate. I made my coffee slowly, took my time with it, measured the water, waited for it to heat, listened to the quiet sounds of the kitchen filling the space. Routine, familiar, grounding. But underneath it there was something else now. Awareness. Every movement felt observed, even though I was alone. I sat at the table with my cup and looked at the envelopes without touching them. One opened, two sealed, one resealed, all of them now part of something larger than themselves. I checked the time. 8:12 a.m. She usually came by earlier, before work. Around 7:30. Sometimes 7:45, never after 8. But she hadn't come yet. I didn't call, I didn't text, because that would be a reaction. And reactions create patterns. Instead, I waited. 8:27, 8:41, still nothing. That was new. I stood up, walked to the sink, rinsed my cup, dried it, placed it back in the cupboard. Normal movements. Unremarkable, but even that felt like something I needed to keep steady. Because now, anything out of place might matter. At 9:03, I heard the key. Not a knock, not a call. The key. Sliding into the lock, turning, clean, confident, she let herself in. I didn't move from where I was standing. I just turned slightly as the door opened. "Hey," she said. Her voice sounded the same. Light, casual, like yesterday hadn't happened, like nothing had changed. "You're late," I said, not accusing, just stating. She closed the door behind her and shrugged. "Busy morning." No explanation, no detail. She walked into the kitchen, set her bag down and glanced at the table. And for a moment she paused, just a fraction of a second, but I saw it. Her eyes moved across the envelopes. Quickly, too quickly, then she smiled. "You didn't open them," she said. I shook my head. "I thought I'd wait." "For me?" she asked. The question was light. But there was something underneath it. Expectation. I didn't answer right away because now the answer mattered. "Yes," I said finally. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. A small shift, but real. "Good," she said. Then she walked to the table and reached for the opened envelope. Not the sealed ones, not the resealed one, the one she had already handled. She picked it up, glanced at it, then placed it back exactly where it had been, or where she thought it had been. Her eyes moved again, across the other envelopes. Slower this time, more careful. She noticed, I knew she did. The order wasn't the same. The angle wasn't the same. Something was off. But she didn't say anything. Instead, she reached for one of the sealed envelopes. The one that had been resealed. Her fingers paused on it for just a second. Then she picked it up, turned it over, looked at the flap, then opened it, carefully, as if it hadn't been opened before. As if she was doing it for the first time. I watched her, didn't interrupt, didn't comment, because this was more important than any argument. She pulled the letter out, read it quickly. Then placed it back inside, folded the flap down, and set it on the table, in a slightly different position. A correction, an adjustment. She looked up at me. "That one's just a notice," she said. I nodded. "I figured." She smiled again. But this time it didn't reach her eyes, because now she knew something, and she was trying to decide how much I knew. I walked slowly toward the table. Not directly to her, just closer. "What did you find yesterday?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "Nothing important." Too smooth, too fast, the same tone as before, but now I could hear it clearly. The structure, the preparation, the control. I looked at the envelopes, then back at her. Are you sure? I asked. She held my gaze. Yes, I nodded slowly, then reached for the smallest envelope. The one she had just opened again. I didn't open it. I just held it, looked at it, then placed it back down, exactly where I had moved it the day before, a few centimeters to the left. Her eyes followed the movement, instantly, tracking, measuring, and for the first time there was no smile, no softness, just attention. You moved them, she said, not a question, a statement. I met her gaze. Yes, silence, because now the pattern had shifted, not completely, but enough. You don't usually do that, she said, again, not accusing, just noting. I do now, I replied. Her expression didn't change much, but something underneath it did, because now I wasn't following the version of me she expected, the one who didn't notice, the one who didn't adjust, the one who didn't question. I stepped back slightly, gave her space again, because this wasn't about confrontation, it was about observation, and what I saw in that moment wasn't just concern. It wasn't just control, it was something more precise, something that had been building quietly, step by step, and now that it had been noticed, it didn't stop, it adapted. She reached for her bag, opened it, and pulled something out, a folder, thin, organized, prepared. She placed it on the table between us, then looked at me. We should probably go through a few things together, she said. Her tone was calm again, controlled, back to what she knew, back to what she had planned. I looked at the folder, didn't touch it, not yet, because now the mail wasn't the focus anymore. It was just the beginning, and whatever was inside that folder had been waiting for me to notice it, or maybe waiting for me not to. I didn't open the folder, not right away. Because the moment I did, I would be stepping into something she had already prepared, something structured, something she expected me to follow. Instead, I looked at it the way I had looked at the envelopes the day before, as an object, not yet as content. It was thin, plain. A soft gray cover, slightly bent at one corner as if it had been carried around for a few days. Not new, not improvised, used, that mattered. Because it meant this wasn't something she had put together that morning. It had been ready, waiting. How long have you had that? I asked. She didn't hesitate. A little while. The answer was vague, carefully vague. Since before yesterday, I asked. A pause, then, yes, I nodded once, because that confirmed it. This wasn't a reaction to what had happened with the mail. The mail was just an entry point. The folder was the next step. I pulled out the chair and sat down, slowly, deliberately. Not because I was ready, because I needed to control how this unfolded. She sat across from me, the same place as yesterday, the same position, but this time the space between us felt different. Defined, structured, like a table used for meetings, not conversations. We can just go through it together, she said, soft, measured. We don't have to do everything today. That sentence sounded generous, flexible, but I could hear the structure underneath it. We can start now. We can continue later, but we will continue. I placed my hands on the table, flat, still, then asked, "What is it?" She rested her hand lightly on the folder, not opening it yet. "Just a few things that might make everything easier," she said. Again, easier, always easier. I let the word pass this time, because arguing the language wouldn't change the direction. "Like what?" I asked. She looked at me, carefully, then opened the folder. Slowly, as if the act itself mattered. Inside were several sheets of paper, neatly arranged, clipped together, categorized. She turned the first page toward me. "This is just a summary," she said. I looked down. At the top in clear print, daily task overview, below it a list, short, simple, structured. Morning, check mail, review messages, confirm appointments. Afternoon, follow up on pending items, organize documents. Evening, prepare for next day, note any changes. I stared at it, because this was not something I had asked for, not something I needed. But something that made sense. That was the problem. It made just enough sense to seem reasonable. "Why do I need this?" I asked. She didn't answer immediately. She watched me read. Then said, "It's just to keep things consistent." Consistent, a new word, but connected to all the others. Easier, safer, now consistent, I leaned back slightly. Because now the pattern was becoming clearer, not control all at once. Structure, layer by layer, mail, then documents, now routine. What happens if I don't follow it? I asked. She paused. That question hadn't been part of her plan. It's not about following it exactly, she said. It's just a guide. A guide, I nodded slowly, because guides don't require agreement. They suggest. They influence, they become habits, and habits become proof that you need the guide. What else is in there? I asked. She turned the page, next sheet. Contact list, names, numbers, doctor. Bank, insurance, utilities, all written clearly, organized, accessible. My information, rewritten, reframed, placed into her structure. I thought it would help if everything was in one place, she said. I didn't respond, because now I wasn't looking at information. I was looking at intention. She turned another page. This time a form, familiar, too familiar. I felt it before I fully read it. Authorized mail handling request. The same one, the one I had seen in the drawer, only this one was cleaner, not folded. Not hidden, prepared, ready. This one isn't filled out yet, she said quickly. But we can go through it together. The word felt heavier than anything else she had said. Because together implies agreement, participation, consent. I looked at her. You already filled one out, I said. The sentence landed quietly, but it stopped everything. Her hand froze on the page. Her eyes lifted slowly to mine. What do you mean? She asked, carefully, too carefully. I held her gaze. 3 days ago, I said, before you changed the locks. Silence, real silence this time. Not controlled, not measured, just empty. Her fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the paper. You went through my room, she said, not angry, not loud, just stating. I found it, I replied. That mattered, the difference mattered. She looked down at the form again, then back at me. And for the first time, there was something she hadn't prepared for. You weren't supposed to see that yet, she said. The words slipped out before she could stop them. And the moment they did, the structure broke. Because now it wasn't about helping, or guiding, or making things easier. It was about timing, about when I was supposed to know, and when I leaned forward slightly, not aggressive, just closer. Then when, I asked, she didn't answer. Because now she didn't have a version of this moment ready. Not this one, not this path, not this sequence. And that meant one thing. For the first time, we weren't following her plan. We were somewhere else, somewhere she hadn't prepared for, and whatever happened next wouldn't be something she had already decided. She didn't close the folder, not immediately. Her hand stayed where it was, resting lightly on the form as if she could hold everything in place just by keeping it still. You weren't supposed to see that yet. The sentence lingered, not loud, but final in a way that didn't need volume, because now it had a timeline, a sequence. There was a moment she had planned for me to know, and this wasn't it. I leaned back slightly. Gave her space again, because pressure would push her back into something she already understood. Defensiveness, justification, rehearsed explanations. I didn't want that, not yet. So there is a right time, I said, not accusing, just clarifying. She looked at me, carefully. Yes. No hesitation this time, just honesty. And that honesty felt heavier than anything she had said before. After what? I asked. She hesitated, not because she didn't know, because she wasn't sure if saying it would change something. After things are clearer, she said, clearer, another word that sounded reasonable until you tried to define it. What does that mean? I asked. She exhaled slowly, looked down at the folder. Then back at me. It means after we're sure. The word slipped out before I could stop it. She didn't correct it, because that was how she saw it. Not her, not me, us. A shared decision. A shared responsibility. A shared conclusion. But only one of us had been making the decisions so far. Sure of what? I asked. She didn't answer right away. Her fingers moved slightly across the edge of the page, tracing the corner. A small, repetitive motion, almost unconscious. Then she said, that you're not missing things. The sentence was careful. Not definitive, not accusatory, but still structured as a condition. I nodded slowly, because that made sense in her logic. Everything she had done, every step, every adjustment was building toward that moment. Confirmation, proof, certainty. "And if you're not sure," I asked. She looked at me. Held my gaze longer this time. "Then we move forward with this," she said, touching the form lightly. There it was, the end of the path, not immediate, not forced, conditional, but already decided. I sat back in my chair, looked at the folder, then at her, because now the entire structure was visible. Mail, then sorting, then routine, then documentation, then authorization, each step small. Each step reasonable, each step leading to the next, until the final one felt inevitable. "How many steps are there?" I asked. The question caught her off guard. She blinked. "What? In your plan," I said. "How many steps?" She didn't answer, because she hadn't thought of it that way, not as steps, not as a process, just as doing what needed to be done. "I don't have a plan," she said, soft, defensive. I nodded. "I think you do." Silence. Because now we were no longer talking about actions, we were talking about intention. I reached forward slowly, not toward the form, toward the top page, the daily task overview. I picked it up, held it in my hands, looked at the structure again. Morning, afternoon, evening. Everything defined, everything accounted for, everything predictable. Then I placed it back down, exactly where it had been. "You wrote this for me," I said. She nodded. "Yes, do you follow something like this?" I asked. She hesitated, then no, that mattered, a lot, because structure for someone else is not the same as structure for yourself. One is support. The other is control. I leaned slightly forward again, not aggressively, just enough to shift the space. "Why not?" I asked. She didn't answer immediately, because the answer was obvious. But saying it would make something clear, something she hadn't admitted yet. "I don't need to," she said finally. There it was, not cruel, not intentional, just true. She didn't need it. But she believed I did, and everything she had built, everything she had changed was based on that belief. I nodded slowly, because now there was nothing left to question. Only one thing left to decide. I looked at the form again, then at her, then back at the form. "Do you have a pen?" I asked. She froze, not visibly, but I felt it, a shift in the air. A pause in her breathing, because that question led somewhere she recognized. "Why?" she asked. Carefully, I met her gaze, because now this moment mattered more than anything else. "Because I want to see what happens if I sign it," I said. Silence. Complete. Because now we were standing at the edge of the pattern, the place where everything repeated. The place where 3 times before I had agreed, and everything had gone back to normal. She looked at me, longer than before, searching, trying to understand if this was the same moment. Or something different, and for the first time she wasn't sure, which meant neither was I. She didn't hand me a pen, not immediately. Her hand stayed where it was, resting lightly on the edge of the folder, as if any movement might confirm something she wasn't ready to accept. "You don't have to do that," she said. The sentence came out softer than before, not corrective, not guiding, just uncertain. I didn't move either, because this moment wasn't about the form. It was about what she believed would happen next. "I know I don't have to," I said, calm, measured. "That's not why I asked." She watched me carefully, her eyes searching my face for something familiar, something she had already seen before, the version of me who would eventually agree, the version who would make this easier. But I wasn't moving toward that version, not exactly. "I just want to understand," I continued. "What happens if I follow your plan?" She exhaled slowly, a controlled breath. The kind people take when they're trying to steady something inside themselves. "It would help," she said. "That's all." Help, the word again. But this time, it didn't carry the same certainty. It sounded thinner, like something she was repeating more out of habit than belief. I reached toward the folder, not quickly, not suddenly, just steadily, and this time she didn't stop me. I picked up the form, held it in my hands, looked at it again. My name, her name, the statement already written. "Resident has difficulty managing official correspondence independently." The words didn't feel abstract anymore. They felt assigned, defined, permanent if I let them be. "Where did you get this?" I asked. She hesitated, then said, The housing office website. That made sense, official language, structured phrasing, designed to sound neutral, objective. Unquestionable. And they accept this with just a signature, I asked. She nodded. Yes. A pause. And supporting information if needed. Supporting information. I didn't ask what that meant. Not yet, because I already had an idea. The opened letters, the delayed responses, the routines she had begun to document, all of it could become proof. I set the form back down on the table. Didn't sign it, didn't move it, just placed it there, between us. So this is the step that makes everything official, I said. She nodded again. Yes, no hesitation. Because this part she understood completely. And after that, I asked. She looked at me, carefully, then said, "Then I can manage the important things for you." The sentence was simple. But it carried everything. Access, control, authority, not temporary, not conditional, defined. I leaned back slowly. Because now the structure was complete. Everything led to this. Everything pointed here. Everything justified this moment. And all it required was my agreement. I looked at her, then at the keys, then at the form. Because now there were two ways this could go. The way it had gone 3 times before, or something else. I reached for the pen on the table. Not hers, mine, the one I had used for years, the one I always kept in the same place. I picked it up. Held it loosely in my hand. Then looked at her again. She didn't speak, didn't move, just watched. Because now this was the moment she recognized. The one that led to resolution. The one that ended the conflict. The one that made everything easier. I placed the tip of the pen on the paper, right above the line where my name would go, and paused, not for effect, for clarity. Because once this was done, it wouldn't be undone easily. It wouldn't be just a conversation anymore. It would be record, documentation, proof. I lifted the pen slightly. Didn't sign, just hovered. Then I asked, "What happens if I do?" The question changed something immediately. Her expression shifted, not dramatically, but enough, because that wasn't part of the moment she expected. "If you do," she began, then stopped, because now there wasn't a clear answer, not one she had prepared, not one that fit the structure. "We keep things the way they are," she said finally. The words sounded uncertain, because the way they are was exactly what she had been trying to change. I nodded slowly, then looked back at the form, at the empty line. At the space where my name could go. Then I lowered the pen, set it down without writing anything. The silence that followed was different, not tense, not waiting, just open, unresolved. And that was the point. I looked at her, because now we were no longer at the end of her plan. We were somewhere else, somewhere she hadn't prepared for. "I'm not going to sign something that defines me in a way I don't agree with," I said. Calm, clear, no anger, no resistance, just fact. She didn't argue, didn't push, didn't try to convince me. She just sat there, looking at the form, then at me, then back at the form, because now the path forward wasn't defined, not for her, not for me, just open, and that meant one thing. For the first time, we weren't following a pattern. We were making a choice. She didn't reach for the form, not to pull it back, not to push it toward me. She just left it there, between us. And that was new, because until now everything had been moving, adjusted, directed, placed. Now nothing moved. The room felt quieter because of it, not empty, just unstructured. I watched her for a moment, really watched, because without the plan in motion, without the next step defined, she looked different, not weaker, not smaller, just less certain. "What are we supposed to do then?" she asked. The question wasn't defensive, it wasn't rhetorical, it was real. And that mattered more than anything she had said before. I leaned back slightly. Not to create distance, just to give the moment space. "We start by stopping," I said. She frowned slightly. "Stopping what?" "All of it," I replied. I gestured lightly toward the table, the folder. "The form, the mail, the parts you've already decided for me." She followed my gesture with her eyes, then looked back at me. "And if you are forgetting things?" she asked. The question came softer this time, less certain, less structured. I didn't answer immediately, because that question deserved more than a reaction. It deserved honesty, not the kind that defends. The kind that examines. I might forget something, I said finally. Everyone does. She didn't interrupt, so I continued. But that's not the same as not being able to manage my life. The distinction stayed in the air between us. Clear, defined. She looked down at her hands, at the keys she was no longer holding, at the empty space where they had been, then back at me. I didn't know where the line was, she said quietly. That was the first time she had said something without structure, without preparation. Without control, just truth. I nodded once. Neither did I said, because that was also true. The line hadn't been crossed all at once. It had been approached, step by step, quietly, until we were standing on different sides of it without realizing. She leaned back slightly in her chair, not relaxed, just less rigid. And if I stop now, she asked. What if I miss something important? The fear was clearer now, less disguised, more real. I looked at the table, at the envelopes, then back at her. Then we deal with it, I said. Together, the word stayed, different from before. Not a structure, not a condition, an agreement. She nodded slowly, but I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't fully convinced. Not yet. And that was okay, because this wasn't about convincing her. It was about shifting something deeper. I reached forward and closed the folder. Gently, not as a rejection, as a pause. We don't need this right now, I said. She watched my hand as I moved it, followed the motion, then looked at the closed folder, as if seeing it differently now, not as a solution, but as a possibility. I slid it slightly to the side, not out of reach, just out of the center, because it didn't belong there anymore, not between us. She nodded again, more firmly this time. Okay, she said, and this time, it didn't sound like agreement to a plan. It sounded like acceptance of something unknown. I stood up slowly, not because I needed to leave, because the moment had shifted, and staying seated felt like holding onto something that had already changed. She looked up at me, followed the movement. What about the mail? She asked. I almost smiled, because that was where it had started. I walked to the table, picked up the smallest envelope, the one that had been opened and resealed, held it in my hand for a moment, then handed it to her. Open it, I said. She blinked. Now, yes. A small pause, then she took it, carefully, like it mattered more now than it had before. She opened it. This time, not pretending, not hiding it, just opening it. She pulled the paper out, read it, then looked up at me. It's just a notice, she said. I nodded. I know. Silence. Then I reached for one of the sealed envelopes, turned it over, then handed it to her as well. You open that one too, I said. She hesitated, just slightly, then did it, carefully, deliberately. She read it, then looked back at me. Bill, she said. I nodded again, then took the last envelope, held it for a moment, then opened it myself, not slowly, not carefully, just normally. Like I always had, I read it, then placed it on the table, nothing urgent, nothing complicated, nothing that required intervention. I looked at her. See, I said. She nodded. But this time, there was something different in her expression. Not certainty, not control, just recalibration, like she was adjusting something inside herself, not to a plan, to reality. I placed the letters back on the table, not in a neat stack, not aligned, just placed, and for the first time since this started, the table looked like mine again, unordered, unstructured, real. She stood up slowly, picked up her bag, but didn't move toward the door immediately. What if I'm wrong? She asked again. I met her gaze. Then we'll know, I said, and we'll fix it. She nodded. This time without hesitation. Then she walked to the door, opened it, paused, then turned back toward me. Tomorrow, she asked, not I'll come back, not I'll check, just a question. I smiled slightly. Tomorrow, I said, and that was enough. After she left, I didn't move right away. The door closed softly behind her, and the quiet that followed felt different from the one before. Not heavy, not watchful, just quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't expect anything from you. I stood there for a moment, looking at the table, at the letters, not aligned, not sorted, just there. Exactly as they should be. I walked back to the chair and sat down, slowly, not because I was tired, because I wanted to feel the moment settle. The folder was still off to the side, closed. Unopened again, unfinished. I reached for it, not to reopen it, just to move it. I placed it further down the table. Not hidden, not discarded, just no longer central. That mattered. Because this wasn't about pretending it didn't exist. It was about not letting it define what came next. I picked up one of the envelopes again. The bill. Read it more carefully this time. Line by line, amount due, date, details. Nothing complicated, nothing urgent, nothing beyond what I had handled for years. I placed it down, then picked up the notice. Read that too, still nothing. Just information. The kind of thing that fills a life quietly, without needing intervention, without needing someone else to interpret it for you. I leaned back in the chair, looked around the room. The same kitchen, the same light, the same objects, but something had shifted, not outside, inside, the way I saw it, the way I felt in it, because now it was mine again. Not because nothing had changed, because I had seen the change, and stopped it before it became something else. I stayed there for a while, long enough that the morning turned into afternoon. Long enough that the silence became familiar again. At some point, I stood up and went to the bedroom, opened the drawer, looked at the form one more time. The same words, the same structure. The same assumption. Resident has difficulty managing official correspondence independently. I held it for a moment, then folded it, carefully, not along her crease, along my own, a different line. A different direction. Then I placed it back, not under the scarf, on top of it, visible because hiding it wasn't the answer anymore, seeing it was. I closed the drawer, and left it that way. The rest of the day passed without interruption. No calls, no visits, no adjustments, just time. In the evening I made dinner. Simple, routine, the kind of thing you do without thinking. And that was the point. I didn't need to think about it. I didn't need a list. I didn't need a structure. I just did it. Because I knew how, because I always had. Later I sat in the living room with a book, read a few pages, then stopped. Not because I forgot what I was reading, because I was thinking about her. About the way she had looked when she handed me the keys. About the moment she wasn't sure anymore. And I realized something then. This hadn't started with control. It had started with fear. A small moment, a small doubt, something she had seen, something she hadn't fully understood, and instead of asking, she had built something around it. Something that made her feel certain. Something that gave her control. But certainty isn't the same as truth, and control isn't the same as care. The next morning I woke up early, before the alarm. Before the usual sounds of the building. I went to the kitchen, made coffee, sat at the table. The mail was still there, exactly as I had left it, unmoved, untouched, and that was enough. At 7:42 I heard the key, the door opened. She stepped inside, slower this time, more aware. "Hey," she said, her voice was softer, less certain, but still there. "Hey," I replied. She looked at the table, at the letters, then at me. "You didn't move them," she said. I shook my head. "No," she nodded slowly, then walked in, placed her bag down. But this time she didn't go straight to the table. She stayed where she was, waiting, not for permission, for something else. Understanding. I picked up one of the envelopes, held it out to her. "Want to check it with me?" I asked. She hesitated just for a second, then stepped forward, took it, opened it. And this time we both read it. At the same time, no structure, no roles, no control. Just two people, looking at the same thing, and that was enough.